Thank you so much, Jenny, and everybody here at Creative Mornings for having me today. It's a total pleasure to be here. Thank you for those very generous words. And I want to give a special shout out to Amber Tollefson for nominating me to be your speaker today. Thank you, Amber, for your endless support, cheerleading, and friendship. Thank you. And I want to thank each and every one of you because each of you are here to embrace creativity, interact with it, and show up for it. And until we can debunk the myth that some of us are creatives and some of us are not, and we will debunk that, the center's aim is to do that, I totally applaud all of those who do actually realize that they have it within them. You guys represent that, so it's a very special room to be here with you all. I'm going to use a bit of notes to get through today because I don't know about you, but Crossroads for me have been really like seismic shifting. And so I want to be really intentional about every word that I use to express my crossroads with you. So crossroads to me have not really ever felt very binary or left and right or like here you can stop or go back. Like for me, the paths usually disappeared, like just out of thin air. I think, Jenny, you mentioned that in your remarks that, all of a sudden you're going down a path, you're trailblazing, and then all of a sudden the road just completely disappears. And that's really how it's felt for me. So instead of putting up a famous quote, these are actually words that I've chosen to use to describe crossroads for me, that when the path forward disappears, and in my cases they have, it's resilience that clears the brush. And you're left with really like this open plain and field, but it's creativity that helps you to build a new path forward. And so when I go through these crossroads, recognize that that's really been my experience, and I gather perhaps that it's been that for you as well. So the first crossroad that I experienced happened in 2008. When I was a little girl, I grew up here in Boca Raton. I'm a Boca Ratonian. I know a lot of you guys are Boca Ratonians too. I grew up here in Boca. I went to Boca Ballet Theater as a young child. I actually really didn't love dance all that much, but then I got on stage as a rat in the Nutcracker at like the age of 10. I was actually half a rat. I was a double-casted rat with my twin sister. And you would think that that wasn't like all that exciting, but I just really got excited about being on the stage and creating, this new character and making the audience feel something that day. And I got bit by the ballet bug, and I decided that day I wanted to become a professional ballerina. And I was in the studio like 6 or 7 hours, 6 or 7 days a week for hours on end. My mom's here, she can attest to the endless hours of dedication. And I ultimately did end up becoming a professional dancer. I was accepted to Houston Ballet's second company to further train and perform with the company, one of the best companies in the country. And then I chose to come back here to Florida and danced with a company called Ballet Florida out of West Palm Beach. Simultaneous to all of that, my very well-intended parents implored me to go ahead and also get an education for a backup career. God forbid, something happens to you and the career is so short, you want to have a backup, something that you can depend upon. And so I decided to study, of all things, civil engineering, which is very, and again, we're going to debunk this, but this like left brain, right brain thing. And civil engineering was what I decided to take on because, well, one, I was good at math and science, and two, I decided, well, that's a pretty safe career. They'll take you at any age, and if I dance a full career into my 40s, perhaps that would be an opportunity to, have some great safe backup. So I got, the degree, I was dancing, everything was going really well, and all of a sudden, something really did bad, very bad did happen. In 2008, the recession hit, right when I graduated from FAU with my degree. Something I thought I was going to shelve and not use for a little while, but in fact, I was faced with my very first crossroad. I had to decide. I could wait 2 to 3 years until the recession lifted, and I didn't know exactly. None of us knew how long that was going to take. And a dance career is not something that you can put on the back burner and wait something out. You have to be actively in it every day. Or I could choose, to move forward with this civil engineering degree that I really didn't want to do. I really wasn't all that excited about it, but I had to make that choice. And so actually, before I tell you the choice that I made, how many, with a show of hands, felt their own crossroads in 2008? How many of you went through that? Probably a good bit of you in this room. well, first of all, we're a scrappy bunch, right? We had to really reinvent ourselves. We all went through an incredible moment. Then we had to choose to really start anew in some cases, or perhaps really reinvent what we were doing to get through that period of time. So I applaud all of you for that crossroads. You're all here today. So the path I chose was to go on that path of civil engineering. It was what I felt to be a safer, more practical route. And at first I really hated it. It was so black and white. Sorry, Mom, my mom's a civil engineer. And I just was like so unjazzed about it. It was so what felt to be very uninspiring. And while I'm smiling in this picture, standing on a man boom under the Miami River Bridge, overseeing bridge replacements of pads that were being replaced underneath the bridge at 2 o'clock in the morning. I was not happy. I assure you, I was not happy taking this photo. But I came to realize after a few years in the industry that I could disrupt and differentiate the way that I approached my work. This is a picture of me for those of you that are familiar with the Boca area. We have one of our former Deputy Mayor, Andrea Virgin, here. This is Park Place, which is a mixed-use development on Yamato Road where Prezzo's and Fresh Market are. And the work I was doing was land development. I was working for developers. And I started to ask myself, like, why do we have to design these projects like the same way every time? Why do we look at this all with the same cookie cutter approach? And so I started asking my developer clients questions and like leading with like empathy and like curiosity. And I would say, you know, are you going to hold the property or are you going to sell the property? Because maybe I'll design it a little bit differently to consider what it is that you want. Do you have young mothers? So I don't know if you've, show of hands, who's been to this shopping center? Yes. Do you notice all the parallel parking spots, right? I was like, you know, I like to just like zoom in. I want to get to my spin class. I have groceries and I've got my little toddler with me. I need to be able to just like pull and make this really easy. I've got cut throughs, you know, so that, you know, there's landscaping. The building is in the middle of the site so that you don't have to walk through this field of parking. So I realized that I didn't have to approach every project the very same way. I could actually lean into the creativity that I had in my back pocket that I could pull out and apply to something as black and white as civil engineering. And I discovered in that moment that I could learn how to create a new path. I didn't just have to choose this path that was in some ways felt like it was chosen for me. I could really lean into my creativity and choose to discover a new path and paint new landscapes and lean in and define new spaces and experiences and opportunities for the clients and the communities that we were building in. And that, leaning in with curiosity and discovering that I could change spaces, experiences, and opportunities for people became the first two seeds of what would ultimately become the center that I lead today. Second crossroad approached. This was in 2015. Now this one is not, at least at first, professional. It was very deeply personal. Everything was going great. Designing 15 projects over the whole South Florida area. Got married to the absolute love of my life, who I had gone to school with. Sorry, guys. At FAU. And we welcomed a beautiful little girl named Victoria. And I'd just gotten back to work 4 months after having her, after spending a few times with Victoria, a few months with her. And my husband went away for a very routine work trip with his colleagues, a multi-city trip, with the last stop in Akron, Ohio. This picture actually was a picture just taken as he was landing in Akron. Unfortunately, the plane did not land safely. They actually stalled, the engine stalled. And it ran into an apartment building. Thankfully, nobody was in it, but the 7 passengers, 2 pilots did pass away, including my husband. So in an absolute remarkable moment, I was faced absolutely with a crossroad. And at first, it wasn't, by the way, I should say, I got the news in the car driving home from work. And my mom was there, greeted me at the door, knowing the news, and I collapsed on the threshold. There was no path in front of me, but I also could not even in that moment choose a path forward. I couldn't even make it through the threshold of the door. But slowly and surely, I realized that I had to choose. So in the first crossroad, I discovered I could create a new path. But in this instance, I had to choose a path forward, and I had to do that brick by brick, sip of water at a time. Trying to take down a bagel was like swallowing sandpaper. It was extremely difficult, but I realized that I had to, for the sake of my daughter and our future, we had to deliver a new path forward together. Her and I had to do that. And at first, it felt like I was being thrown into a pot of boiling water, and I was like, how am I going to do this, But then a really wonderful person gave me a great metaphor that really changed my perspective on how I was going to do that. Imagine there are 3 different things being thrown into a pot of boiling water. This one's representing an egg, and an egg goes into a pot of boiling water and comes out not only with a hard exterior, but a hard interior. It doesn't want to let anything in. You could be a potato. When you're thrown into a pot of boiling water, you go in sturdy and stable, and you come out mushy and can't hold yourself really well together and pretty easy to poke through. Or you could be the coffee. And a coffee, goes in as one thing, and it goes into this turbulent water that's boiling. And all of a sudden, it doesn't reject the turbulent water. It actually absorbs it, and it becomes something completely transformed, something completely perhaps different than it went in, but still with the same essence, just a little bolder, a little stronger, and a little bit more purposeful than it went in. And so I loved this metaphor because, and don't get me wrong, I was absolutely the egg and the potato at times, but I realized that I could choose to make a path forward that would allow me to be the boldest, baddest Sumatra coffee that I could imagine making. And I didn't know what that meant yet. I just knew that that's the kind of purposeful intention I was going to lead my life with. So at first, leading with purpose, I decided to just, spend some time with family for a little while, reevaluate some things. Victoria and I traveled literally all over. We were like nomadic. We just could not sit still. I just needed to get out and explore. My mom and I actually launched a civil engineering practice, decided I wanted to disrupt the way I was approaching my work really fully, and I couldn't do that without starting a new business, so we did that. And I got involved into volunteerism. And it was in that volunteerism that I realized a new purpose in life, and that was I wanted to not just change the landscape of the projects that I was working on, which were leading with intention, but not necessarily changing the world in any way. And I launched what is now the Center for Arts and Innovation. And I did that not necessarily knowing exactly what I was going to do, but I joined the board at Boca Ballet Theater, the organization that taught me the love of the arts and the love of creativity. And I said, in the first board meeting that I sat in, there was this like dusty old master plan of an arts complex that had just not come to be. And I was like, guys, I know enough about the performing arts, and I know enough about land development to be dangerous. Like, let's take that thing off the wall and let's make it happen. And the Center for Arts and Innovation was born. And from there, myself and some really incredible, dedicated people, some of which are sitting in this room, and a big shout out to our former deputy mayor, who was my absolute champion. We did a lot of really amazing things. We garnered an unbelievable grassroots effort. All of the great, small, medium, large stakeholders. We garnered the support of philanthropists, institutions, corporations. We hired some of the most globally renowned planners, designers in the world, including Renzo Piano Building Workshop out of Paris and Genoa, and secured a 94-year ground lease for those 2 parcels sitting right next to us for 94 years for a ground lease. And everything's going well. We were really, moving, robustly forward, had surpassed a fundraising threshold in our first year, started a conceptual design, and a third final kind of crossroads approached. And it felt like it came out of nowhere, but really there was, even trembles in the ground that if I look back and reflect, were really there. And so the third crossroads, one of the most recent, actually, in fact, I haven't talked about this at all with almost anyone. This only happened just in January. So our third crossroads was that we decided to terminate the agreement that we had worked so hard on with the city of Boca Raton. Now I'm going to read this because this is really raw. I have talked about the other 2 crossroads in my life. This one was tough. We, after several years of planning the center, through approvals, renderings, fundraising, momentum, we had hit a wall with the city. The agreement we had was just no longer aligned with the future that we were looking to build. And it was clear that we were at an impasse with the city. And while we had been at an impasse before with the city and we had some differing perspectives, I was, in those prior instances, I was stubborn. I was convinced that this had to happen. It had to happen on those two parcels. It had to happen in the city. It had to benefit the organizations that I was looking to benefit. I was trying to fill this gap. But this impasse just felt incredibly different. This time I realized very vividly that I was at a definitive crossroads. And while in the other crossroads in my life, I learned to or had to discover a new path forward, this time I realized that I could actually choose a new path forward. One that was clearly, really, absolutely necessary. And I could choose that I could end the path that I was on and choose one that was going to serve the vision that we had for this project. Now, make no mistake of it, this was not an easy choice. In fact, this was one of the hardest decisions that I, and certainly our organization, have had to make, perhaps ever have to make. But we chose to not because we were giving up on the project at all, but because the conviction behind the vision mattered to us more than compromising any further. So since making that choice to end a path and create a new one, we've had the space and the time to step back. How many of you have ever been so in it that, you know, whenever you two decide to take that step back, all of a sudden things just come into focus. Things are a lot clearer. You have like the space and the energy to reflect on what is the right path to choose. And so that's what we did. We chose to reflect. We chose to realign ourselves behind our purpose, vision, mission, and importantly, a set of values that are purely centered on who we are and what we aim to accomplish. And while we're currently evaluating the where along South Florida, including still, here in Boca Raton, where we're going to deliver the center, we're going to know that by the end of the year. We know that one thing is absolutely certain, that this new path will bring us greater opportunity than was ever available on the last one. So all three of these crossroads, while painful, give birth to amazing clarity, much of which has been built in to our refined purpose, which is, and by the way, so closely aligned with your own, to ignite curiosity by reimagining the spaces, experiences, and opportunities where people connect, create, and confidently bring bold ideas to life. We envision, a world where curiosity never fades, where creativity is essential, and where every person, regardless of their background or profession, represented right here in this room, has the confidence to explore their fullest creative potential, helping you all develop new paths at every crossroad. And it's in that belief, in the power of creativity that lives within all of us, that we, in turn, have the ability to change the world. As I close, I will leave you with a quote by Albert Einstein and a call to action. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. I believe that really what crossroads really are simply opportunities just disguised. And not just for individuals, but for society. Like my three experiences, sometimes these moments of difficulty present opportunities to either learn how to build yourself a new road. Sometimes they're paths we have to create because there's simply just no other option. We've got to do it. And number three, sometimes they're the path that we choose to create because it's simply the right thing to do. So today, as a world, we're standing at our own crossroads. Each and every one of us have the power individually and collectively to create new paths towards a better future. And so I ask each of you to think about the crossroads that are already here, either in your own life or around the world, and say to yourself, it isn't which path you're going to choose. It's rather what you'll choose to create next. And in turn, what and who you'll inspire in the process. Thank you all very much.